went through 9 years of infertility. Had a doctor sit down and tell me 6 years in that I had a 1% chance of ever getting pregnant naturally without the help of IVF or other things. And I went on to have 6 babies in 6 years. Let's talk about it. A lot of you guys who are here already know the story or already know a lot of the story because in the beginning we were documenting so much on Instagram and on YouTube. So somebody last week on TikTok asked me to recap what all happened. And I'm going to forget some parts. There's going to be things that I don't explain in detail. So Derek and I got married in 2010. We immediately knew that we wanted to start trying to have children. And we were a little bit naive. We thought that things were not going to be hard, as probably most people think when you start trying to get pregnant. I feel like infertility is much more commonly talked about now. And so maybe people are a little more hesitant of like not just assuming that they will be able to get pregnant. But back then, 16 years ago, it wasn't talked about as much. Well, I remember us just like the months going by and thinking like it will eventually happen. Like obviously we're not trying hard enough. So we finally went to see my OB. He was so fantastic. I wish so badly now that I could at least call him and be like, thank you so much for what you did for us. He probably wouldn't have even remembered us. He has passed away since all of this happened, but he was so fantastic. He was so hopeful and so helpful. He helped us with getting Clomid and Letrozole and trigger shots, and we did many rounds of IUI with him for like practically no cost, which if you've been through infertility treatments, you know that that is like not heard of. Even IUIs now are several $1,000s in a lot of places. We wouldn't have been able to afford that then, and so it would have just kind of been like a, well, I guess we'll come back at some point, but like we can't do this now. He was so great. We tried with him. He did tell us that I was dealing with PCOS and that Derek's sperm count was not great. His sperm count and his motility was not fantastic. But we thought that we were kind of at least navigating around the sperm issue because we were doing IUI, obviously, which is like washing away all the bad sperm. It's like only keeping the good stuff. We thought that that would fix it. Obviously did not. We were not successful getting pregnant any of those months that we were trying all of those different things. I was still not ovulating successfully some months, even being on Clomid or Letrozole. We kind of left him with him kind of saying like, you're young, keep trying. We did. We kept trying. We had some different tests run over the course of those years, like an HSG, which showed that my tubes were at least clear after the HSG. We continued to test Derek's sperm. We were able to kind of increase the quality of that. And through weight loss, I was able to reverse my PCOS. So I started ovulating every month. Even though my cycles were long, I was ovulating every month, and that helps drastically with trying to get pregnant because you have a chance to get pregnant every month, whereas before months were going by that I wasn't having a period, I wasn't ovulating, and so those were months that I was not going to get pregnant. We finally get around to 2015. Derek gets a job at Apple so that we have IVF coverage. We picked an IVF doctor that was about 2 hours away from us where we were living, but we picked him because he was the cheapest option that we could find. And looking back now, I so wish obviously that we had had other options, that we had more money that we could have put into it to actually see a good quality IVF doctor, because we walked into this doctor's office and he was just like, you want to do IVF? Let's do IVF. When do you want to start? There was no like going over medical history. There was no him saying like, hey, like in a loving way, I know we all hate to hear when you go to a doctor's office, like you should lose weight, but like truly that should have been the suggestion, is like, you need to lose weight. You need to be better versions of yourself, healthier versions of yourself before you start trying to get pregnant, especially since you're trying to go through IVF right now. Like this is so much, there's so much riding on this that you want to make sure that you're in the best shape that you can be. And instead he was just like, sure, whatever, like let's do IVF. We were not successful in IVF, obviously. You know, I had a doctor that I felt like didn't really care if we got pregnant or not. He was getting paid either way. There were a lot of red flags through our IVF cycle. There were, you know, my body was not responding well to the stems. We had to go for almost a week longer than what they thought in order to get my ovaries to respond. And then at 25, I only got 10 eggs that made 4 good quality embryos. And so like at 25, that should have been a red flag of being like, hey, something's not right. Like, let's dig deeper and figure out what is going on with this. But instead, he shoved us right into a double embryo fresh transfer. And my body was not ready to be pregnant. My body had just gone through IVF. It was almost overstimulated. I was like borderline being overstimulated. Obviously, you guys probably have all seen the video getting the call that my beta was positive. It was an 8. My HCG was an 8. And, you know, us being cautiously optimistic, but really hoping that like this was going to be it for us. We really like truly believed when we started IVF, obviously, that like this was the answer. This was the last ditch effort that we had. This was going to be it. We went through those weeks of pregnancy and it was just a roller coaster, right? One beta was good, one beta was bad. I was bleeding the whole entire time. My progesterone was low. We had such a hard time finding the progesterone that I needed. They wanted to up. I was on Cronone, which is just a suppository progesterone gel. And they wanted me to switch to having injections. And it just was like, it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. So once we found out that my beta was dropping and that I was losing that pregnancy, they immediately scheduled us for a double embryo frozen transfer the next month. That one did not work at all. Nothing happened. I had a negative pregnancy test the whole entire time. As you guys all know, at that point, Derek and I were so defeated and so just at a loss for what to do about anything. Truly just kind of coming to the point of being like, we're never going to be parents. Like, this is not working. We've given it our all. Like, we don't have any money left. There's no more IVF coverage left on our insurance. Like, this is it. And we scheduled a consult with a fertility doctor nearby, who I'm sure is fantastic. I have had friends who have used him. I think that if we had gone to him for our first IVF round, for our only IVF round, that we maybe would have been more successful, because he would have turned us around and said, hey, come back when you're healthier, come back when you've addressed these things. And he just sat across from us after going over all of our medical history and all of the tries that we had had and said, I think you're going to have to do IVF again. I would give you like a 1% chance of ever getting pregnant naturally. So Derek and I left that appointment and said, okay, we're going to pivot and we're going to adopt now. You guys watched us go through all of that. Several attempts to adopt before finally being asked to adopt Eloise in May of 2018. We were on cloud nine. We were so happy and so fulfilled and so grateful to be parents. We were focused on making our relationship with her birth family as healthy as we possibly could. Really, we're just pouring our all into that. Obviously, we were still trying to get pregnant in some ways, but we weren't doing anything. You know, we were busy. We had a little baby, and we, you know, there were months that we were successful trying and months that we just completely missed the window wholly. January of 2019, I was not feeling great. I decided to take a pregnancy test, as I had for so many years before that, and there was a faint line on it, but not enough of one that made me really think that it was positive. I assumed that it was a fluke. I assumed that it was a bad test. I tried to go to the local CVS to buy a first response test, and they didn't have any, and I was like, whatever, this is pointless. I'll go in the morning. Like, truly did not believe that I was actually pregnant. The next morning, I got a first response, and sure enough, it was positive. So we rushed to my OB that day, got put on progesterone. Thankfully, my progesterone was low. It was like a 7 something. Went on to have our first successful pregnancy in September of 2019. And then we got pregnant shortly after that, and we had our second son, our third baby, in August of 2020. Then we decided to have one more. We had our fourth baby, a little girl, in November of 2021. Then we were surprised with our fifth pregnancy, which is so crazy to go from 9 years of infertility to not trying or planning to be pregnant, and then me just getting pregnant. We had our fifth baby in February of 2023. And what I documented over on TikTok was us trying for our sixth baby, who we had in December of 2024. And so that's the Cliff Notes version of everything that we went through. Obviously, there's so much that I'm leaving out and not going like into drastic detail about. I would love to go back through, I was saying on TikTok, my old videos here, just watching them with you and talking through those videos and like red flags that I see now, things that I wish that I had known then that I know now, what I would do differently if I could go back to those days and those videos and those times. And that's one reason why I talk so much about infertility and what I've learned is that, you know, sometimes we just need somebody who's been through it to step back and say, hey, this is what I wish I knew 10 years ago. Figure it out now so that you don't go through all of that time like I did. I didn't even have surgery to check to see if I had endometriosis until 2016. So until I was 6 years into trying to get pregnant. And I think that was a huge puzzle piece for us, that was really messing up my body and my chances of getting pregnant every month. And so we went through 6 years of trying to get pregnant before addressing that and realizing that it was an issue. So yeah, that's the story of how I went through 9 years of infertility to having 6 babies in 6 years. Still a wild story to talk about. It still gives me goosebumps, and it still is insane to me that like that's what we went through and that this is where we are now. Life feels like such a dream, honestly. I mean, you guys watched the heartache and the tears and the stress and anxiety and the low days of truly just being like, why can we not be parents? Like, what are we doing wrong? Are we not supposed to be parents? Like, is this a sign from the universe that like you are not going to be good parents? So like now I know that that is not true. We just had to fight extra hard. And I love when people say that like, we were waiting on Ellie, like Ellie opened the door for everybody else. And it's so true. It's so true that like she was what our hearts were missing so much, and she brought so much joy and love into our lives that I feel like then we were truly able to just kind of like move on and like be the best versions of ourselves as parents. So that is my story. That's the cliff notes of my story. If you want more in detail about like specific things, you can go check out my TikTok, talk about some stuff on Instagram, but not as much of like the nitty gritty of infertility and like testing and endometriosis and PCOS and all of that stuff, testing for ovulation, all of those things. And so if you want to know like more in details, you can obviously ask here and I can make other videos about that stuff. That's the story. That is the rundown of the crazy title, going from 9 years of infertility to having 6 babies in 6 years.